Now let's go ahead and experiment with some HTML forms. I'm going to change the title here at the top. And I'm going to delete our style here. Just clean things up a little bit. And let's go ahead and delete all our content in between. So we have a blank, fresh canvas to work with. So let's go ahead and create a form. And our form tag is going to be form. Now we can place multiple different elements within these forms. So if you think about it, typically what does a form have? Well, it has usually a spot to type your name and your last name, maybe your email address, perhaps a drop down with a few things to select. It may have a radio button. There's multiple different things we can have submitted through a form. But to keep things simple, let's start with a basic form where it asks for our first name, our last name, and then just a simple submit button. So within our form, we would specify our first input. So a text box is going to be an input. So we'll put input space type, and inside type, which will bring up two quotations, we're going to just put text. And we can see all our options here. We could do a checkbox, a color, a date time, email, file. Well, we're just going to do simple text here. All right. And what we also could do is we could give these some more values, like our name. We could give this a name. So let's give it a name and give this a value of, how about first name, because we're going to ask that this be the first name. And also what we could do is we could place a value here, and a value is going to show up inside the text field. So we could put first name. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to close this off. Close that input off, and I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to actually delete this. This is a self-closing tag in itself. So let's go ahead and take a look and run this. Oops, we're going to see some problems here. I need to make sure that I save that. If you ever run into some problems when you do live view, make sure you're saving it. Okay, so what we have here is our first name. We have a text field. There's an S on the outside here, which we'll take a look at why in a second. But you'll notice when I start typing, this sucks. I have to erase this before I can type my first name. Well, usually I don't use a value. I use what's called a placeholder. And this is instead going to give us a placeholder that's dimmed out where it says our first name, so we know to write our first name. When we start typing, it's going to disappear. Let's go back in here. Obviously, we have an S right here, so that's why that's there. But let's add another input field, and also let's specify what they're supposed to be putting here. So above my input, I'm actually going to put, let's put a paragraph here. And inside this, let's just put first name. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this because we want the same exact type of input field for our last name. So let's put last name here instead of first and just change the content. So this will be last name. We're going to have input type text. Name, we'll call this one last name, of course. And our placeholder is going to be last name. So let's go ahead and say that again. Take a look. All right, there we go. So we have our last name, our first name, so we can enter our first name here and our last name, blah, blah, blah. Well, now we need a way to submit our information. So within our form, below this, we're going to put another input type. Now, this input is going to be a type of submit. All right, now we can also place a couple different things here, a value, but let's go ahead and we're just going to wrap this up as it is. We don't need to do that. Obviously, we're not going to be implementing the actual functionality to this form, only because we need to take use of a server-side language, JavaScript or PHP or something like that, and we're not going to get into that quite just yet. This is all about HTML. So we should now have a submit button just below these. Let's save that and take a look. All right, so there's our submit button. We can type a name, last name, submit. Obviously, it's not running anything, even though those names disappeared. And it is doing something, but obviously we're not collecting that information anywhere. let's go ahead and move this submit button down. Obviously, it doesn't look very good on the right side over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a break right here at the end of the second input. So let's place a break and let's see if that helps out. That should, yep, so that'll move that down there a little bit. We can also change with CSS pretty much everything about these forms. Obviously, these don't look that good, even though they don't look as terrible as some of the other standard stuff. But yes, we can style everything about these forms. So let's continue a little bit more and take a look at a couple different options we have within forms. So let's go ahead and take a look at some more HTML form elements. And I'm just going to continue to add these below everything we've done thus far, but above the submit button. So above the submit, let's go ahead and create another input type. So this actually isn't going to be an input. What we're going to be putting here is a text area. So I want you to type text area, and we can give this a name, and it's good practice to give them a name, and this will be, you know, content. Maybe this is what the message content is. And from here we can specify rows and columns, how big we want this to be, but let's just keep it simple. I'm going to keep that as it is and then close that text area out. So let's continue to save and take a look at what each of these individual elements look like. All right, there we go. So we have this little draggable text area where we can write, you know, multiple lines of text. Okay, pretty cool. Let's keep moving right along. Perhaps we want to create a drop-down list. That's pretty easy as well. So once again, above the input type, let's go ahead and we're going to use the select element. So go ahead and select, and we're going to give this a name of the category of things that we're selecting. So let's give it a name of fruit and close that out. And below this, we're going to have multiple different option values. So let's go ahead and I want to indent this, and we'll do option value. And then from here, we'll give this a value of, let's say, apple. And then that'll automatically close that tag. And then we're going to write the actual text here. So let's write apple. And I'm just going to copy this a few times, and we're just going to have multiple different fruits here. So let's Control C. And I'm going to paste this 4 times, and maybe we'll have, you know, how about apple, strawberry, kiwi, watermelon? Okay, so there we have 4 different selections that should drop down from a drop down menu. Let's give this a name at the top here in paragraph text. So I'm just going to call this, let's do select your, oops, can't type, your favorite, I really can't type, fruit. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. Let's take a look and see what our drop-down options look like. Oh, there we go. So select your favorite fruit. We now have the option apple is here, and we can select one of these. So that's all I'm going to go over for now as far as forms go. I don't want to dive too far into it because while learning this part's easy, it's more practical to learn how to actually use our forms and have them operate and actually collect data. So we'll get into that a little bit later on.